Hello, and welcome to another Tiermaker episode. This one is for Muse. My name's Gordon. I'm here with my brother John.
Hello.
And we're going to do the ranking we did a couple of years ago for Muse albums. You can find links to that podcast and everything at jeffreymusic.rocks. We'll start straight away with the first album, Showbiz, from 1999, which we ranked quite near the bottom.
Yeah.
I think we're a little bit harsh on it personally. I quite like it, but I kind of get why people are a little sniffy about it, as they'd not really found their sound and accused a little bit too much of copying Radiohead, although there is a definite hint in there of them. What did you say about this album? Can you remember?
Yeah, what you just said, that they haven't really found their sound. It's a bit sort of mediocre, and the Radiohead comparisons, I think, are fair on this album. It does sound quite a lot like that, quite derivative. So, although those comparisons get a little bit tired quite quickly as Muse move on, I think at this point it's pretty fair criticism. I think it's all right, but I don't think it's that great.
Yeah, I felt that the Radiohead was only really that prevalent in a couple of songs, and I think there are some actually really good songs on this album. So I would have it at decent, but I'm guessing you would be sort of on the Now Special level here.
Well, I think for me, it's probably between the two, between Now Special and decent. I mean, you're much more of a Muse fan than I am, so I'm happy to let you have your head a little bit on this one. But yeah, it just doesn't feel like it stakes out much new territory. It just feels like it's, here's a very, very competent debut album by some, pretty good musicians, singers, songwriters. That's a bit derivative and not that interesting, but it's all right. So I think I would more go towards Now Special.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you said. I just think I think still a good listen, but it is derivative, and I accept that. So I've put it into decent for me. Are you okay with it there?
Well, as I said, as long as this doesn't get too crazy, I'm willing to let you have your head a little bit with this, because I really don't feel like I'm not the world's greatest Muse fan or expert. So
fair enough. So we'll go second album then, which is Origin of Symmetry, 2001. And I kind of feel the opposite about this one. This is when they having to find their sound. But I personally find the album a little bit boring. It's sort of a stepping stone to the really good stuff. And obviously with a couple of exceptions, particularly Newborn, which is an excellent song. Really love that. But I don't tend to listen to the album at all. So I would have actually ranked this below Showbiz, but I get that a lot of people would disagree with me on that.
Yeah, I think I'd probably disagree with you on that. Although, again, I do recognise a lot of what you're saying. I do think it is a definite step up. It does feel like it's got a lot more go. It's a bit flat. It's not brilliant by any means. It does have the great examples that you said. I quite like Dark Shines as well. It has got some good stuff on it. I do feel that they've moved on a lot. I think any Radiohead comparisons now really do feel a bit tired. They are finding their own sound. It does feel like it's moving forward. Fantastic album cover as well, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
This is where I'd probably put this in decent. If I put that Showbiz in Now Special, this would be indecent for me.
Yeah. I mean, we did rank it higher, so we will put it in decent. Which
we should probably say, actually, just say, because obviously Muse have released an album since we did the original podcast, and we're not including that. All we're doing is ranking the original podcast, but just putting it into tiers. We may or may not revisit. We haven't decided.
Although we can have a little word at the end about the new album, because I think I know where I'd rank it anyway.
Right, well, let's have a little word about that later then.
Okay, so third album, which is Absolution, that's 2003. This is very much a step up again. And I think with this album and the previous one, they are helped a little bit, but now I think by the remixes, because they always sounded, the production on the albums didn't sound that great on the original releases. They have sort of remastered them both, and they do sound a little bit better. But I do think Absolution is really stepped up, really excellent, and I would be putting this in banger.
I think I largely agree with you. I might go more splendid than banger, but I think, yeah, I completely agree. It's a massive step up. It really does feel like this is a band really in their stride now, fully confident, cranking out some cracking songs like Butterflies and Hurricanes, Hysteria really jump out. I think it's a little bit overlong, perhaps. I think it had 6 hit singles on it. So it's a definite massive step forward. I think the album cover, again, is really good. I'm mentioning that just because I want to mention some of the album covers later. I actually think this is probably my favourite album cover, even though we ranked Origin of Symmetry as a better album cover. I think actually I've changed my mind this is a better album cover. It's a definite step forward. It's a really good album. They've hit the big time by this point as well. Sort of really broken through and become super popular. Is this when they started playing stadiums, or is that?
Yes, pretty much, yeah.
That seemed to happen really quickly. It just sort of like felt like they booked Wembley Stadium, which felt like, to me, a kind of a brazen move. And I thought, well, hang on a minute, who are you? But they packed it out, so they obviously had a fairer handle on their popularity than I did.
I think that was Black Holes and Revelations tour.
Was it?
I did go to that. They played 2 nights. But yeah, it is very good. And we ranked it 3rd, which I think some people will find a bit harsh on it. And I kind of half agree, but I do think the ones above.
Well, that was why. It's not there's criticism, is it?
Yeah. Well, no, that's what I mean. But I think a lot of people.
It's in banger for crying out loud.
That this is peak Muse, which I would agree with.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Yeah. It's in banger, so we're recognising its greatness as an album.
Yeah, and I think personally, I kind of prefer the slight progginess that they move into next, and I think that is why it is 3rd, whereas this is just more an out-and-out rock album, basically.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And the cover here is a Hypnosis one, isn't it?
Yeah. Considering how bad their covers get, it's quite shocking how good this cover is and the previous cover. But they get very, covers. Very bad, ladies and gentlemen.
So this cover is actually a photograph. It's not an animation or anything.
Well, typical Hypnosis, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, they don't do any tricks. So we'll move next to Black Holes and Revelations, 2006. We ranked this top, so obviously I think this is a banger. It is moving towards the slightly sort of proggier side, but only a little bit. Knights of Sidonia, I think, is like moving towards the end suite that they end up doing in the next couple of albums, which I really like. This album just really works.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with all of that. I think when we wrote this up for our website, we called it a beautifully crackpot creation, as all the best Muse stuff is. And I think that's about right, because it's got everything, the pop rock, prog, symphonic, bombast stuff. And as you say, that closing suite is really good fun. And it's just pure mucking around, being as bombastic and as fun as they could possibly be. And they really pull it off, I think, on this album. So yeah, I completely agree with you. And it's still got the fab tunes like Supermassive Black Hole, which I think is absolutely brilliant single. So yeah, it's a great balance, this album.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit more variety in style on the album as well, which helps.
Yeah. I mean, they were fans of a lot of our favourite bands like Rush and dEUS, Rage Against the Machine. They were bringing a lot of that in. And at this point, it starts to feel like, well, and the previous album, I guess, but here more, I think, that it really feels like that they're bringing all of these fantastic influences into something that it does sound new and different and not really like anybody else. It sounds like they're being Muse and being Muse right in your face.
Absolutely. I agree. I think that they do have their own sound, and no sound is 100% original.
No, of course not. And it doesn't have to be. Come on, fella, move it along.
Okay, so next we have The Resistance, 2009, which we ranked 2nd in between Black Holes and Revelations and Absolution. So that definitely sits on the banger category as well. I think they've just moved on a little bit with the slightly more progginess, I think. This does have the proper suite at the end, which I do like. I think you could argue that Absolution is better if you just look at individual songs, but I think this works better as a whole album, as a complete sort of set of songs, and there is the variety. I really love Undisclosed Desires and Uprising. I think, yeah, they'd be in my top 10 if we did one.
Which we're not going to.
No, we're not. Definitely not. I do think these 3 we have on the banger line are definitely the best 3 and are head and shoulders above everything else they have done.
Yeah, I would agree completely. I think these 3 are definite peak. The band at their peak Muse. And I agree with what you were saying. I actually prefer this album to Absolution. Well, that's right, 2nd, I suppose. Because I do think it's got more depth to it. I think Absolution is really good, but it pulls a little bit quicker, perhaps, than this. This does feel like it's just a little bit more considered. I think maybe they take more risks with this because they're already, now at this point, they've made it completely. Maybe it gives them a little bit more wiggle room. So yeah, similarly, I kind of quite like the proggier end of it. Yeah. So yeah, happy with that being where it is.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think a lot of people would think Absolution should be higher than that, but as I said, I think the other 2 albums.
Well, they can do their own chuffing podcast, then, can't
they? Well, they can, yeah. Well, they probably
do.
To them. Most people do.
Well,
don't
they do, yeah.
Yeah,
probably do. It's hardly original concept, is it? Ranking albums.
No, I don't think we were the first.
No, probably not.
So next, we've got The Second Law from 2012. This one I think is a bit weird. Like hearing the songs individually, you wonder what the hell's going on, but then you listen to it as an album and it does actually work. But I don't think it's anywhere near as strong as the previous album. But it is jolly. I think we've got their attempt at a Bond theme opening up, which I obviously didn't go anywhere.
Supremacy.
Yeah, which does work. I think it would have been a good Bond theme. And there's a decent amount of variety, and they do have the closing suite as well, which they did play some of live because I did go to see that tour. So yeah, I think it's a good album, but I think is more obviously not as good as what has come before.
I think I agree with all of that. I maybe like it slightly more than you do. But other than that, I just tend to agree with everything you said, so I won't bother just repeating that. You're putting it in Splendid?
Yeah, I think Splendid because it's in between.
Okay.
Obviously. But I think as a whole, it does really work. Would you be having it in decent or?
Maybe top end of decent, but I mean, I'm happy with Splendid. Let's be positive.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a negative Nelly.
No, we wouldn't want that. So next, we have Drones 2015, which we ranked bottom.
Quite rightly, I think.
Yeah.
And can I just mention the album cover?
I think, yeah, well, the album cover is dreadful. The concept, I think, is a very cringy and dreadful. Or the concept itself, I suppose, is fine. It's the way it's been dealt with. I think whereas I like in previous records, I like all his conspiracy theory stuff. It's sort of quite amusing and it's sort of dealt with a little bit more subtly. This just seems like no subtlety at all, which is shown in the record cover. And the song, something like, I think Psycho, although I like it musically, I think the lyrics are a bit embarrassing. And there are sort of, I think 3 or 4 really good songs on this. Dead Inside is great. But
yeah, I was going to mention that.
I think it just falls a bit flat and doesn't work. It seems like they've just not really tried hard enough.
Nothing much more to add to that. It's only 3 years since the last album, which is about the sort of the standard rate of banging out albums, a couple of years, 3 years. It just feels like, oh, right, it's time to do a new album. Not quite sure what to do. Let's do a bit of something that's just not that great. As you said, didn't try hard enough. Completely agree. Some good songs, but yeah, conceptually weak. Album cover, absolutely horrific. Have you put it in Out Special?
I've put it in Out Special. I think
it's not a clanger. It's not a clanger.
No, there is too much. There are, too many, I think, good tracks on here to categorise it as a clanger because there are sort of 3 or 4 really good songs, I think. It's just the
it's definitely not a clanger.
As such is not great.
Let's keep clanger special for those albums that are really shite. And this doesn't fall into that category.
So the last album, or the latest album at the time of doing the podcast, was Simulation Theory 2018, which, again, we've got another dreadful
it's
record
awful.
cover here.
Awful.
I think some of this is actually...
It hurts my eyes.
I suspect this one might be a little bit tongue-in-cheek.
Well, yeah, I bloody hope so. But even then, even tongue-in-cheek, it is awful. At the end of the day, it's objectively awful. So even if there is some humour behind the concept, it still produces something which is aesthetically so displeasing that I wouldn't take this album seriously. It would, unless I was an absolute, Muse fanatic. There was no way I would be seen in public with this.
I mean, I think obviously they've changed quite a bit. This is not really like any of the other albums. And there are some bits we were quite, I think, a little bit kind on it by ranking it above Showbiz. I think because it was new at the time and it seemed more interesting. And there are some nice tracks and some of it is interesting. So, I mean, we have to put it on decent. I would be tempted more with the Out Special level now if I was ranking now. But there is some nice stuff on the album, but just not enough.
It did improve with listening. It was the first couple of times I heard it, I thought, oh my God, this is just not great at all. But it did improve, to be fair. But yeah, you're probably right. I think I would put it in Out Special underneath Showbiz. I think that's correct.
Yeah, that's where I would put it now, definitely. But obviously, we're going with the old ranking.
Yeah.
So it moves up.
Hands are tied, fella. Hands are tied.
Yeah. So, of course, we're not going to mention at all their latest album, Will of the People. And that would be, I think, reasonable because, I mean, having heard it, I really think that would, I think, be one I'd be dropping in the clanger section, where the record company was apparently trying to do a best of, and they thought, no, let's try and write a new best of. And I feel that, I mean, they've failed miserably. That there are some bits where you think, oh yeah, this could be coming off Drones or Simulation Theory, but they wouldn't be the stronger tracks off those albums. I really struggle to listen to this album. I don't like it at all.
So they tried to write an album which was in the style of each albums are like the first song is in the style of Showbiz or the next song in the style of Absolution, or what? Is that what the concept
Something
is?
like that. I think it's
They ended up writing a worst of instead of a best of.
I think, yeah, well, they have, yeah. But yeah, I think they thought, well, I suppose to write an album derivative of themselves because they didn't want to release a best of.
Well, I can see why you wouldn't want to release a best of. I can understand that.
I can,
And
yeah.
I quite like the idea of doing that. But obviously, if at the end of the day, if the end product is not that great, then sorry, fellas. So you're putting this in Clanger. Go on then, put it in.
I would put it in
I think
Clanger.
you should. There you go. Let's complete the picture. There we go. We've got an album in each category.
Yeah, and another not very good album cover as well, I would point out.
Yeah, but although at least that is a step up from its predecessor.
It is, yeah, definitely.
So there we go.
Yeah,
Let's have a look at Muse.
We've sorted Muse. That's the ranking. So just a reminder, if you want to find any podcasts, articles, whatever, it's jeffreymusic.rocks. And you're obviously on the YouTube channel at the moment, so click all those things you meant to click, please.
Yeah, and don't bother with social media because we've got bored of that. We don't do that anymore.